Hi, this is Russ Swanson. Welcome back to a second edition of the Chase to the Death series. I want to start with a little clarification from our last episode. We mentioned this book here. This was that rare pamphlet that was produced by J.H. Hansen, who's a member of the posse and a member of the press that was following these guys. And in the book is actually, it says John J. Lemon, and that was his pen name. So it was J.H. Hansen, the writer of it. But if you're trying to find the book, you can find it listed under J.H. Hansen or John J. Lemon. So if you go to Project Gutenberg on that link that we provided on the last episode, it will take you to the site, and it says J.H. Hansen on that one. So just wanted to start with a little clarification on that. I do have a graphic here of a first edition of one of these books here, looking at that, and this one, there's another graphic here with the an auction site, and the value on that was anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. So that's pretty cool. If you come across one of those, let me know. It'd be pretty cool. All right, so let's get started. So last week we talked about the action on Division Street. We talked about why the gang went to Minnesota, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about what actually went on inside the bank. This first picture we have is a picture taken shortly after the robbery occurred, so we can kind of see the layout of the bank. And what's amazing is this is what it looks like today. So if you have not been to the Northfield History Center, I would recommend going to that and checking out the museum. It's a fantastic staff, very knowledgeable, and just being able to walk into this room where these events happen and have it look identical to the day that it happened is pretty amazing. So what I did is I found a picture of the this came from the 1897 newspaper, the St. Paul Globe. They had interviewed some of the eyewitnesses from that day several years later, and so I thought this was a pretty good graphic. Again, the bank was pretty small, and in this picture you can see the position of the guys inside. So we've got Joseph Haywood, Alonzo Bunker, and Mr. Wilcox in their positions there. This next graphic is going to show what the layout of the vault actually looked like. So a lot of times there's confusion about, was it the vault they're trying to get into, or was it the safe? Well, there's actually two layers of protection. There was a double door vault that was recently installed, and then there was the safe itself, which had the time lock on it. And in I believe it was in Clell Miller's pocket, they found a newspaper clipping that talked about the bank in Northfield had just gotten this time lock installed on the vault, and I actually found a copy of that article that he would have had in his pocket, and we'll put that up on the board as well. So if we look at this graphic here, you're going to see the vault, the double door vault, and then there's also an advertisement for the Hall's safe that was in there as well. So again, kind of gives you a little better idea of the layout and what that would have looked like. Here is a picture of that Yale time lock. Pretty cool. This was actually a 1876 advertisement that I found that talks about these locks, and these were actually the bank had recently had this installed, and they had a big display on these at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia as well. So it was a pretty new, pretty popular thing for banks to put in. What it did is it allowed the banker to go home and get a good night's sleep without having to worry about somebody pulling him out of bed and opening the vault, because you literally could not open the vault between a certain time. And so it was, again, kind of expensive at the time, but a lot of banks found it very worthwhile. And we'll get into that a little later as far as how that comes into play in the story. Wanted to show you a couple of other pictures that I took when I was out at the museum. You can see on this graphic where I was standing taking this picture. And so the first one shows the entrance of the bank. And so this is with the doors that the three would have come in during the robbery. And then there's another angle that shows the counter. And again, I thought it would just be a good way to show some perspective on how small the room actually is and where things were laid out. All right, so we'll get into some of the characters that were in the bank at the time. So we've got Frank Wilcox, as I mentioned earlier. He was the assistant bookkeeper, and he was actually positioned in the spot where I've got him in the picture here. And then Alonzo Bunker was the teller, and Joseph Lee Haywood was actually the acting cashier that day. George Phillips was the normal cashier, but him and President Nutting were actually at that Centennial Exposition or expedition when when the robbery occurred. And so as we continue on, here's another angle of where they would have been standing that day. And I like this picture because it kind of gives a perspective of what they would have been seeing and what their view would have been looking like. In fact, I was asked to do some presentations out at Northfield for Defeat of Jesse James days in 2025. And it was very, very cool. They actually allowed me to be in the bank while one of the reenactments was going on. And we've got a short video we'll show you. But I thought it was really neat because not too many people get to see the view from inside the bank while the action is going on in the street. So we'll play a little short clip of that as well.
You guys here to make a deposit?
Withdrawals only. Withdrawals. The daily limit. Yep.
I put a picture of this clock in here, and this is pretty cool. This is actually the original clock that was in the bank at that time, and it's still set to 2 o'clock, the time of the robbery. So another really cool historical artifact that's in the bank there. All right, so if we continue on, here is what happened on that day. So we've got around 2 o'clock. We've got Bob, we've got Charlie, and Frank James. As they come into the entrance, they jump over the counter. And right away, they force Bunker and Wilcox to get on their knees, and they're asking who the cashier was. Well, they didn't really see Haywood right off the bat because he was kind of tucked in that corner over there by the cashier's desk. And when they asked, who's the cashier, nobody would admit to it because technically none of them were really the cashier. And so as they come across, Bob Younger is now kind of covering Wilcox and Bunker, while Charlie Pitts and Frank James go over to Haywood, and they just make the assumption he's the cashier. And this is something they did not expect. They did not expect resistance. In fact, right away when they jumped over the counter, it was said that the vault doors were open, and Frank actually walked into the vault and looked at the safe, and he saw that the safe door was shut. And so he came back out and wanting to know, who the cashier was so that they could open it for him. Well, Haywood refused. He actually came up with a lie and said that it was on a time lock and he could not open it. Well, it wasn't really a total lie because it did have a time lock, but it actually was open at the time. And what's interesting is had the outlaws just went over and actually turned the handle and pulled, the safe would have opened, and it would have left them with access to the $15,000. I believe they were estimating there was maybe 75,000 in the bank, but there was not that much that day. But it was still a significant amount, about the same amount that they got from the Rocky Cut robbery. So they're basically working Haywood over. They're trying to get him to open the cashier door, and he keeps denying that he can open it. And finally, Bunker, he is on his knees, and he later on admitted that he had access to a small Smith and Wesson revolver, and so he was inching towards that below the desk where he was standing, and Bob Younger saw him going for that gun, and went and took the gun and kind of laughed at him because it was a small caliber, and so now they're getting frustrated. The robbers are thinking, this is going to be an easy haul. We'll come in, we'll hit the bank, and we'll get out. And so again, they didn't expect the resistance that they were getting, so they're starting to lose their temper a little bit. At one point, one of them tried going back into the vault, and Haywood leaped forward and tried shutting him in there, and I think it was Charlie Pitts that had got his arm caught in the door, and enraged him even more. So he was. Again, Haywood was just resisting. He was trying to put a stop to it. While that commotion was going on, Bunker decided to make a run for it. So he runs through the gate that you'll see on the graphic here and out the back door. And as soon as he takes off running, Charlie Pitts goes after him, and he takes a shot inside the bank, and he misses. And then Bunker runs out the back door. And we'll switch to this other graphic here. And he runs down this back alley. And as Charlie Pitts gets to the back of the bank, he takes a second shot and actually and shoots Bunker in the shoulder. And then Bunker continues to run down that alley and makes his way to Dr. Kuhn's office, as you see in the picture here. Well, between the blocks there on 5th Street, he actually run into Mrs. Ames, and I'm not going to get into all the details of that. Maybe for another show we'll get a little deeper into like the investors of the bank. We'll talk about the Ames brothers, and we'll talk about Adelbert Ames's father-in-law, who was Benjamin Butler, who were investors in the bank, and we'll get into a little deeper as far as did the James Younger gang have knowledge of these investors in the bank, and did they hit this bank specifically because of the union ties? But again, that's for another episode. Today we just want to focus on the robbery and particularly the escape. So Bunker makes his way out, gets to Coons' office, and about now the things are getting hot on the street. Cole has come in a couple of times, telling for him to hurry up. They're getting shot to pieces outside. And so at approximately 2:07, the people in the bank, the only ones left are Haywood, Frank, Bill, Charlie, and Mr. Wilcox. So decidedly they had to give it up. They had to get out of there. And so Charlie and Bob jump across the counter and go out into the street. And the last one out of the bank was going to be Frank. And at this point, they've beaten Haywood up. They cracked him in the head with the butt of the revolver. Charlie Pitts at one point had taken his knife out and put it to his throat and threatened him. And finally they realize it's not going to be worth it. We've got to get out of here. So they as they're leaving the bank, Haywood is starting to struggle to get back up from the ground. And there's a table that you can see there. And the reports were that he'd gotten his hands on the desk, and he was starting to pull himself up on that desk when Frank James pulled his gun and shot him in the head and killed him. Here's a picture of that table. Here's my brother Steve kind of reenacting that. But so that's where Haywood would have been. And a little interesting side note to this is there was reports that Haywood was maybe going for a gun, and a couple of interesting facts on that. As we were there, we did actually find a drawer, a little hidden drawer. But in my opinion, had there been a gun in there, which I don't think there was, but even if there was, Haywood would have been in no condition to fight back. He had he had a severe head trauma from getting beat up, and I think he was just trying to regain consciousness. But either way, as we know, the outlaws that were in the bank at the time had been drinking, and the two witnesses, Bunker and Wilcox, even later said that they reeked of alcohol when they came in. So just a combination of being frustrated and drunk, and just kind of led to that, and Haywood's defiance. So they leave the bank, they get out to Division Street and enter the fray out there. And as a quick summary of the robbery, their original plan was they thought they were going to go in and get 75,000, like I said earlier, but there wasn't that much, but there was about 15,000, or about just under $500,000 today's dollars. So what actually happened is they ended up getting $26.70 worth of nickels. Bob had a feed sack that had with the initials HCA on it, and that was pretty common back then. Farmers would embroider their initials on a feed sack. They'd drop it off at the feed store, and they'd fill it up and they'd get it back. So where he got that, I don't know, but the report said it was a feed sack, and they actually ended up leaving those nickels in the bank. So what's interesting is some of these stories that people are, they're still looking for the gold that was robbed from the Northfield bank. Well, there was no gold, and it would have been nickels. And again, they just left it in the bank because remember, they still had quite a bit of money on them from the Otterville robbery, and they weren't going to mess around with $26. As I did kind of the math on that, that would have been about 10 pounds that they'd had to carry. So again, they just left that in the bank. Their plan was to destroy the telegraph equipment. If you remember from last episode, they were going to ride across the Iron Bridge on Division, or just north of Division Street on the Iron Bridge, and they were going to try to destroy that telegraph. Since they had to go south, they were unable to do that. So now the telegraph is left untouched. They were going to ride west out of Northfield, and they ended up having to go south. They were going to try to escape through the big woods for part of their escape, but they ended up having to go through there unguided because their guide Bill Chadwell was killed. They were going to go south into Iowa as soon as they could, but because of what happened, they ended up having to go southwest across Minnesota and into Dakota Territory. So, in summary, there was 2 gang members that were killed during the robbery, and 2 citizens. So Haywood and Nicholas Gustafson were the victims of that. Again, the entire robbery lasts anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes. So I always find that interesting when I go do presentations. It takes me a good half an hour to describe these events that took place in just 7 minutes. But so it went very quick. The surviving members, if you remember, got away on 5 horses. Remember, Bob Younger's horse was shot. We actually have a picture of his saddle that was left on his horse, and so he gets packed up behind Cole Younger, and they ride out of town. And soon this is going to turn into the largest manhunt in U.S. history. All right, so now we're going to kind of focus on their escape out of Northfield and the first part of their escape. Here's a picture that I thought this would be kind of an interesting. Again, I ran it through ChatGPT just to clean it up a little bit, but this is a picture of Division Street looking south, and about 3/4 of a mile from this very spot, they would have rode past the Northfield Cemetery, which ironically is where Haywood and Gustafson are buried today. So as the band, there was again 5 horses riding abreast, and they took out of Northfield. So after the gang left, the town was kind of figuring out what just happened. What are we going to do? And the first telegraph went off. John Ames sent the telegraph, and I'll read it real quick. It was sent around 3:00 p.m. It says 8 armed men attacked bank at 2:00. Fight on street between robbers and citizens. Cashier killed. Teller wounded. 2 robbers killed. Others wounded. Send us some men and arms to chase robbers. Well, there was no state police back then, so they were sending this telegraph out to basically anybody and everybody to get help. and this soon reached St. Paul and Minneapolis, and it didn't take too long for them to respond. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time today talking about the people involved in the manhunt, but there was a probably about 10 or 12 guys. It's probably really worth mentioning and kind of going into a deep dive on that, and maybe that'll be for another episode. But again, pretty fascinating what happened with the gentlemen and how they got assembled. Here is another telegram. This is actually a photograph I took of the one that's in the museum. This was the telegram that was sent to G.M. Phillips when he was out in Philadelphia. It was sent by one of the bank directors, Mr. E.T. Archibald, and it basically said, "Bank robbed, Haywood killed, 2 robbers also killed." So I believe Mr. Phillips had been out at Philadelphia for about 2 days when he got this telegraph. So things changed for them quite a bit. All right, so as the robbers head south on Division Street, one of the first responses after the robbery was 2 gentlemen, one named Jack Hayes, the other one Dwight Davis, and they went to the livery stable where the 2 dead bandits' horses were. So we've got Bill Chadwell's horse and Chloe Miller's horse were running loose in the streets, and they as herd mentality animals, they ended up at the livery stable. So these 2 guys went and got their horses and grabbed some lever action rifles and took off after them. So that was actually the first response to the escape. Happened very quickly. As they chased, as the bandits are running out of town, like I said, we had 5 horses abreast, and there was an old German farmer coming into Northfield with a wagon load of vegetables, and they basically forced him off the road, and he went into the ditch and overturned his cart, and he was obviously pretty excited when he came into town to report what had happened. So that was kind of their first encounter with anybody since the robbery happened. So as they continue south towards the town of Dundas, they had no idea what to expect. It was probably assumed by the outlaws that the telegraph operator would have gotten the word out in Dundas by the time they got there. So it's a short drive down there, but the telegraph was faster than horses. And so what happened is, as the telegraph was sent to Dundas, the operator of that telegraph happened to be on his lunch break, and so he was not there. So as the robbers approached, there was no response from the people from Dundas because they were unaware of what had happened at that point. So if you see on the map here, I put a red star. Now, this either happened before Dundas or just past Dundas, but we do know that with having 6 guys on 5 horses, they needed to get a 6th horse to kind of speed things up a little bit. And so the first horse that they acquired ended up being from a gentleman by the name of Phil Empey. And if you look at the map here, you can see where his farm is. Now, what I don't know is, did it happen at his farm, or did it happen as he was going to his farm? Now, first of all, Phil was not there that day. It was his hired man that they actually stole the horses from. And in the 1924 Argus Leader articles, Phil Empey's wife at that time was living in Sioux Falls. And so as they were doing the 24 articles, they interviewed her, and she explained that Phil was actually at the Centennial Exposition with the gentleman from the bank. So Phil was not there, but they did acquire one of his horses. Now, again, it was not a top quality grade horse like the ones that they were riding, but it was still better than nothing. So it did allow them to go a little bit faster, but still not quite as fast as they would have liked to have gone. And you got to remember, Bob is in incredible pain at this point. He is he can barely stay on the horse. Again, this is a plow horse that they stole from Empey, and so they did not have a saddle at this point. And so they get through Dundas, and at the right along the Cannon River is the Archibald Mill. And here's a couple pictures of that. And it was noted that they stopped here and watered their horses, and they cleaned his wounds, and then they took off again. again, just like you'd have to stop for gas stations for a car, these guys had to stop for water quite regularly to keep these horses going. So any chance they could, they would have to stop and water them. So now they get through Dundas and they continue west and they get back towards Millersburg. And at 4 o'clock p.m., they rode past the the Cushman Hotel, where four of them had stayed the night before. In fact, the owner had recognized three of them from having been stayed there the night before. And so that was at 4 o'clock. Remember, at this point, Bob's horse still does not have a saddle. And then finally, at about 4:30, he did acquire a saddle, and we don't know the name of the farmer that they got the saddle from, but we know that it was, according to the J.H. Hansen pamphlet, it was a half an hour after they'd went through Millersburg. So on the map here, you can see I've got a star, and then we see a yellow road and a green road. Well, the yellow road is the Dodd Road, and there's another graphic we'll talk about that. That was a military road that was designed to help connect St. Peter to the cities, and that's the road that Cole Younger and his group would have been on prior to the raid in Northfield. So they were pretty familiar with the Dodd Road, but apparently not familiar enough, because where I've got this green line on the map, that's the road that they turned off a little bit too early. And so because of that, it slowed them down a little bit. And then also having to stop and get a saddle slowed them down. And that's going to really make a difference in this next part of the story here. So they're angling down to the southwest, and they come into the town of Shieldsville. And they stop up in front of a hotel, and little did they know that the telegraph had actually made its way to Faribault, and a small posse had taken off already from Faribault. Well, I've got a red line on this map here that shows what would be the probable route that posse took. Well, they had arrived in Shieldsville ahead of the James Younger gang, and they were like, it's probably going to be a while till these guys are through here, or we might as well stop for a beer. So they stop in at Haggerty's Saloon, the posse did. And, of course, no guns policy, so they had put their guns in the wagon. Had some long guns that they put in there. So they're in there enjoying a beer, and hadn't been in there very long, and all of a sudden the Younger gang comes up to this hotel to water their horses again. And I believe it was the hotel owner's son started having a conversation with him and said something about there's a posse at the saloon, and so the James Younger gang goes down to the saloon. They ride up, and as soon as they do, the guys inside hear the commotion going on, and they come out. Of course, they're held at bay with guns, and it sounded like the James Younger gang just kind of took their time. They kept continuing to water their horses, and then they actually shot the pump up quite a bit on the pump handle and the pump. And I don't know if they destroyed it, but and apparently a part of that, maybe it was a bullet fragment, actually injured a little girl as well. But anyway, so they survived their first posse encounter, I guess. And so actually it'd be about their second, because the first one would have been Davis and Hayes, and once they got to Dundas, Davis and Hayes decided to back off a little bit because they didn't know if they were getting set up for an ambush. So they decided to continue to follow at a little safer distance until the posse caught up. So this actually would have been their second posse encounter. So they take off. The James Younger gang take off. They're back on the Dodd Road at this point. And shortly after they leave, another posse from Faribault comes up and joins them. So now I believe there's about 15 gentlemen in the posse. And they end up catching up with the James Younger gang in about 4 miles outside of Shieldsville. And I've got this area circled in red that would be, probably the probable area where this would have happened. And in here, not really much happened other than exchanging some shots back and forth, but it was kind of a long range. The only thing that really of consequence that happened here was a wild shot ended up hitting Cole Younger, as he described, hit him in his crazy bone. Well, when it hit him in his funny bone, he was actually leading Bob Younger's horse. So out of instinct and his arm hurting, he yanked his arm and it pulled the horse's head. And of course, Bob fell off the horse and fell on his injured elbow. As you can imagine, how painful that would be. Well, as luck would have it, Bob gets up and tries to get back on the horse. And again, he's got a saddle at this point. Puts his foot in the stirrup, and the cinch broke, and so the saddle fell. So Bob falls on his elbow. And so Cole scoops him up, and they take off. And so Empey gets his horse back eventually, and the farmer that loaned the saddle actually gets his saddle back later as well. While all of this is going on, so this is all taking place around 6 o'clock. When this was going on, this is when the train from Minneapolis shows up in Northfield. And again, I'm not going to mention all of the gentlemen that run that train, but the two worth mentioning are the detectives the detective from Minneapolis, a guy by the name of Hoy, and from St. Paul we had Brissett. And what's interesting about these two is they did not get along with each other very well. They ended up none of them wanted to share information, so it kind of, because of their hatred to one another, they kind of helped botch this robbery a little bit, or botch the posse chase. So again, that was something that helped the James Younger gang because of these two, the animosity that they had towards one another. So anyways, that's about 6 o'clock when this gunfight happens outside of Shieldsville. And because of that, they kind of get lost. They get pushed off the Dodd Road a little bit. And I've got another picture here that kind of shows the area. Now they're starting to get into the big woods. And actually, they've been in just for a little bit. But this is a very heavily timbered area, forests, swamps, rivers, creeks, hard to get around. And so they needed to try to find the Dodd Road again. And the reports say they ran into a guy by the name of Levi Sager. And so I did some research on that, and I found out where Levi Sager lived, and I've got that starred on the map here. Now, I don't know if they came across him at his house or if he was actually on a road somewhere, but they ended up running into him, and they were just going to take his horse originally, but his horse was uncooperative. So they end up just basically kidnapping Levi and making him guide them to the Waterville Road. So on my next map here, now they're leaving Rice County and they're getting into LeSueur County. So now it's starting to rain, and it'll be the beginning of 2 weeks of steady rain, something that Minnesota had not seen for a long time. Even the old timers said they could never remember how much rain that had fallen, will be falling in the next few weeks. So Levi Sager takes them into LeSueur County, and they get to the Waterville Road, and he ends up bringing them north. And it comes across, to get close to the town of Kilkenny. At that time, Kilkenny was a post office, and it was actually further to the west. But on this map here, you can see this dotted line, and that dotted line was the railroad that was getting put in at the time. And so Levi Sager brings them up and brings them into a clearing and pretty much drops them off. And he heads back home. And what's interesting is today that spot where they cross over the railroad tracks is still still named Younger's Crossing, and that's in Kilkenny Township. Looks like section 27. Anyway, so the Youngers now are James Younger gang are looking for some shelter, and they walk about a mile and a half to the west, and they end up staying overnight at the Lord Brown farm. Here's a picture of the barn that is considered to be the barn they stayed in. I don't know if there's any proof of that, but we do know that they stayed at the Lord Brown farm and sheltered there for the night. So now, again, it's raining. We've got a pretty good posse number going, and the posses are starting to go in advance of them. At this point, I'm assuming they're going to be looking at the Dodd Road, because to go through the big woods, yes, it's a good place to hide, but you're not going to go very fast. So a lot of the guards were going up further north to the Dodd Road, and even going further south on the south side of the big woods to more the Waterville area. All right, so they stay overnight. Friday morning, they get up and they need to make a plan. they've got two obstacles in front of them. They've got the Little Cannon River to the north of them, and they've got the Big Cannon River to the west of them, and they've got to get across those. So they get up, and the reports from 1876 say that they went to the farm of a Mr. James. Now, again, I did some research on that, and I could not find anybody in that area in the census records, but I did find a guy with the first name of James, and he was actually the next person that the census people talked to after the Lord Brown farm. So it kind of fits the picture, it fits the description of what happened. And Mr. James was, or I should say, Mr. Cassidy, James Cassidy, was gone, was away from home that morning when the gang shows up at his house, and his wife invited him in, and they asked for directions, and they asked where, they were posing again. They said they were looking for some black mules that got lost, and said they were from Cordova area. So again, the James Younger gang made up a story and asked how they could cross the river, and she thought, well, you might be able to cross behind our place here. There's a pond, but I think you can get through with the horse. And they tried to do that, and pretty soon they come riding past her place again. So obviously they couldn't cross the river there. Just to give you an idea of how marshy and how swampy this is, I've got a couple pictures we'll show you of what the Cannon River looks like today, and you can just imagine it was probably even worse back then when there was a lot more trees and vegetation around. But yeah, to cross out with a horse was not going to happen. So they get pushed back, and they start working their way down a little bit further to the south, and they come across a crew of German workers that were doing some road work. And again, they told them that they were hunting these robbers from Northfield, and they were posse members. And they asked the German road workers. They said, "Are these bridges guarded here?" And if you look at this picture, I've got two red stars on the map here. One on the top of Section 5 and one at the bottom of Section 5. And in 1876, there was two bridges there. And yes, they were both actually being guarded at the time. And so they got some good information about those bridges and that they were guarded. And they asked the workers, they said, is there any other fords that we should know about that might, a place where the robbers could possibly cross? And so they did find out that a little bit further south there was two different areas that they could cross. And so they headed for those fords right away. Now, if you can see on that yellow line that I've got, it's a pretty heavily, this is a map from 1874, so it kind of shows it's a pretty heavy wooded area at that time. So it took them a while to get through there. Well, shortly after they leave the Cassidy farm, Mr. Cassidy comes home and finds out that these guys had stopped there. So right away he's thought this has got to be the robber. So he takes off, and he comes across the same German road workers, and then they find out, yes, these were probably the guys from Northfield. So he runs up to the bridge on the top of Section 5 and talks to Major Rogers, and they decide they better go down and cover the fords. So they head with a group of guys down the west side of the Cannon River, and you can see on the map here I've got the upper and the lower ford labeled. And so they actually get there ahead of the James Younger gang, and Mr. Cassidy is sitting there with two other guys, and they could hear some guys talking on the east side of the river, and sure enough, one of the guys steps out of the woods and walks and starts attempting to cross the Big Cannon River. As soon as that happens, Mr. James or Mr. Cassidy said, now we've got him, and he took a wild shot at him and completely missed, and so it's of course spooked the James Younger gang. They took off back to the east up into the hills. Well, now he realizes, here's this gang, I better go get some help. So he takes off. Mr. Cassidy takes off, running back up to the upper ford to go get more help. Well, the two guys he left there, they weren't gonna. They kind of chickened out. They weren't gonna stay there without any more help. So one guy took off and said he actually left his rifle there, his Prussian rifle, and the other guy was right behind him, and he actually lost his false teeth there. So when those three guys abandoned guarding that lower ford, the James Younger gang actually saw that, so they just wheeled their horses around, and they literally just walked right through that ford and made it across. And not far after that, They ended up stopping at a German farmer's place by the name of Ludwig Rosno. And they basically, he didn't speak English, but his son did. And long story short, they ended up taking his two best horses along with his son. So now we've got another horse for Bob, and they've got his son to guide them through to find the next road. And so they kidnap him. And they go past this church, and again, there's other guys. The other guards are still up on the bridges, and there's another picture here of that you're going to see. And this is from the lower bridge, so that's a picture, a modern day picture of what that bridge was on that river. So we've still got guards in the back there. They're catching more posse as they're coming across, and they're bringing them down, trying to find these guys along the Cannon River. And the James Younger gang are now at the Rosno farm, and ended up taking his son, and they go just a few miles, but it was pretty heavily wooded area, so they finally get him across there, and they make the son switch horses with one of the outlaws. So he's got kind of a broken down horse, and they've got two good horses from Ludwig. And they leave him there. They say, "You wait here, and we'll be back later." So Ludwig's son is waiting there, and about a half an hour later, a neighbor come riding by and asked him what he's doing there, sitting on the road. And the son said, "Well, I'm helping these law enforcement find these outlaws." And then upon hearing the neighbor say, "Well, it's probably the outlaws," he decided it probably was. So he ends up going back home with one of the outlaws' horses. So they keep working their way across there, and they need a place to camp for the night, and they get to near German Lake. And you can see I've got that mark on the map here as well. And this is where things really they have to start making some pretty important decisions at this point. The horses are actually slowing them down, believe it or not, trying to lead them through this heavily wooded area. The horses just were doing so. They decided that they needed to go on foot. So they camp overnight, and in the morning they leave their horses tied up and head off on foot. And this is going to be it was a tactic that actually is going to work for them, but because their posses aren't going to find their horses for several days after this. So they're still looking for them in the big woods area around German Lake. And that's going to give a considerable advantage to the outlaws as they go. So as we continue across, the next morning they leave their horses at German Lake and leave their. The only thing they took with them were their saddle blankets and bridles. So if they found more horses, they would still have something to put. So they abandoned their saddles and everything there. Again, we can come back and do a deep dive on when they were found and there's a whole really interesting stuff about the tack that was left there. But so they continue on, and here's where we get to a point where they either took one road or another. We don't know which one for sure, but they eventually end up near Marysburg. And so they Sunday morning they wake to the sound of church bells. Now, what's interesting is earlier on there was a couple boys. I don't know if this was Saturday night or Sunday morning, but they were these young boys seen some guys camping in the woods, and they went and reported that, and they kind of got laughed off as, yeah, that's not the outlaws. They're still way over by German Lake, but it ended up being those guys. So they wake up Sunday morning to the sound of church bells from the Marysburg church, and here's some pictures of that. I've been out there, and based on the description of where they were at and being able to hear the church bell, there's a road that goes north of the Marysburg Church out to the cemetery, and there's a little creek that runs along there, and it's kind of you can't really see it from the road till you get up there. And to me, when we went out there, it seemed like that would be a very good place to make a camp. So that would be the star right above Marysburg on the map. But again, there's no verification on that, but we do know they were in that area on Saturday night. So again, remember, it's still raining. These guys are miserable, and they don't make much time on their next campsite. So on Sunday, they sneak their way across to just north of Lake Madison, and they set their camp up there and again get a little bit of rest. And finally, they decide they need to start making it towards Mankato. So they leave and they end up finding something that would really be a huge benefit to them. On As they got north of Mankato, they found an abandoned farmhouse, and that was located between sections 32 and 33 in Lime Township. And so they stayed there Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, and so that gave them a chance to get some rest, kind of relax a little bit, tend to their wounds. And by doing that, it really put a damper on the search efforts because there was no sign of these guys back in the big woods. And by now, a lot of the posse are starting to give up and go home. In fact, I believe at this point, Brissett and Hoy were already on their way back to the cities, and they pretty much abandoned the chase. They thought it was hopeless to find these guys until something was going to happen that was going to change everything. So as the James Younger gang are getting ready to leave on Wednesday, they come across a guy by the name of Dunning, and Dunning was out working for a gentleman and was going to move his cows around. And so the James Younger gang finds this guy named Dunning, and they hold him hostage. And of course they act like pretend like he is one of the outlaws and trying to get information from him. Well, they decided that they've got all the information that they need from the guy, and a decision had to be made. Some of the guys wanted to kill him under the thought that dead man tell no tales. The other option they had was to tie him up, and then the other option was to let him go. And it was kind of a decision that was bouncing back and forth between the gang members, so they ended up leaving it up to Bob. And because since Bob was the weak link and Bob was the one that was slowing him down, according to Cole Young's book, Bob said, well, I don't want anybody else to die on account of me. So they did let him go with the promise that he would not tell anybody about their encounter, which of course it didn't take long, and he actually did go to Mankato and got help. And when he did that, the telegraphs got lit up, and the search was reinvigorated. Hoy and Brissett got off the trains, got on different trains, and headed back. And now we've even got the sheriff from Sioux City, a guy by the name of John McDonald from Sioux City, Iowa. He's on his way up to help with this manhunt. And again, at this point, things were so scattered with the posses and the leadership that a decision was made that we got to have one guy that's in charge of this. And so they got a Mankato Civil War veteran by the name of General Pope, and he became the generalissimo of forces. And so he basically was the one that was now going to have authority to, he had access to railroads, telegraphs, and he was the guy in charge, and that's what they needed. Well, ironically enough, as the James Younger gang were going to try to get through Mankato, they were trying to think of the best way to do that. Did they go around it? Did they try to sneak through town? The one thing that they did have in their favor was they were familiar with the railroad, because that's the Sioux City St. Paul Railroad, the very same railroad that took them up to Minnesota in the first place, ran through Mankato. So they actually did follow that, and they went right through the town. They went right through Mankato that night. And unbeknownst to both parties, they ended up sneaking past just, I believe, like 4 blocks away from General Pope's headquarters. And so General Pope knew they were in the area, and he knew that he could not let them get across the Blue Earth River. So General Pope went around, and he basically just locked that all the river crossings down there. He went to the Sioux City St. Paul Railroad and said, "Hey, we need to guard the bridge." And he was told by the railroad. He said, "Well, don't worry about it. We have guards for that, so you don't have to worry about that." Well, one thing they didn't tell him is their guards were kind of inept. 2 young guys, and I believe even like a 14 or 15-year-old kid were left to guard that bridge. And sure enough, that's the bridge that they walked across. Now, it was described as a very very dark night. They called it Egyptian darkness. It was so dark where you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. But the James Younger gang did walk across that railroad bridge, and as they walked across, they ended up coming face to face with this kid. Of course, he got scared, told the guys to shoot, and they took off running. Left him by himself. So then he took off running, and once again, kind of like back on the big cannon, they literally just walked across there without any interference at all. Which hit General Pope like a gut punch when he found that out, because again, it's dark out. It's going to be till morning till they can come start looking for these guys, and now they're across the Blue Earth River, and they are have a lot better chance of escaping now. So as they get across the Blue Earth River, again, they're starving, hungry, and they come into a watermelon patch, and so they have a little bit of watermelon. And as luck would have it, they ended up finding a chicken coop, and I believe it was a Baptist minister that had this chicken coop. So they stole 3 chickens from him, and they ended up at this point they're near Minneopa Falls, and I've got a picture of that. If you haven't been to Minneopa Falls, very very cool place to go to. Well, right next to Minneopa Falls is a place called Pigeon Hill, and so they took their soon to be feast, and they cut across the railroad tracks and went up into the hills a ways. Started a fire. They took their rubber rain jackets that they had and anything else that they could help hide the smoke a little bit, and they kind of put them up in the branches to again help hide that smoke. Well, at this point, the posse's come across looking for them, and they walked right past them. They were in such a hurry, they walked right past the trail, except for the last guy happened to see it. And so he yells at the rest of the posse to come back, and I believe there was actually a railroad engineer that helped point him in that direction as well. So they had a decision to make. The posse did. Do we wait for more posse, or do we just go ahead and charge? Well, they went charging up there and gave away their position, and so they gave enough advance for the James Younger gang, so they were actually able to escape there with the chicken still sitting on the fire ready to eat. So it had been pretty disappointing for them, but they get pushed off of Pigeon Hill, and they escape a little bit further now to the south, and this is where we're going to wrap this up here for this episode. So they get pushed to a place near what's called Jones Ford. And while they are there, this is where a council had to been put together, and they had to make an important decision. They knew they were going to eventually get caught because Bob is just slowing them down too much. And so this is where the James Younger gang splits. And for some, this will be the last time they ever see each other. But again, a decision had to be made. So the younger brothers and Charlie Pitts, they decided we're going to take our chances, and we're going to head to the northwest, while Frank and Jesse are going to continue heading west and southwest. I'll talk a little bit more in the next episode about, was this an amicable split? What actually happened there? But we've got some pretty good news reports from 1876 later on that will kind of help tell what actually happened there. So that's a good place to wrap this up for the part 1 of the escape. On our next episode, we'll get into the escape of Frank and Jesse, and then we'll spend another episode on what happened near Madelia with the capture of the younger brothers. So that's it, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends and family. History is made in the moment, but only endures if it is remembered. My hope is that, in putting this series together, I can play a part in preserving something that would otherwise become mere legend or simply forgotten. So thank you for helping me in that endeavor, and I hope to see you all again soon in part 3.